Does the Deshaun Watson ruling impact your business, and what to do when your employee is no longer engaged? The answers to these two questions and more coming up on the HR Business Partner Podcast. Welcome to the HR Business Partner Podcast. Thank you for listening in. I am your host, John Ratsky, HR Business Partner Extraordinaire, apparently. You know what's funny? We got to talk about this a little bit more. The whole reason this podcast even exists is because I've had people tell me the background of my webcam looks a lot like I should have a podcast. And I said an HR podcast would be the most boring podcast that's ever existed. But you know what? I'm going to make it entertaining. So thank you for watching. You can find a visual representation of this podcast available on YouTube. You just search for the HR Business Partner Podcast, or HR Advice is the YouTube channel. You can find more details of that in the description section of this podcast, wherever you're getting your podcast. We are on Google. We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on every podcast syndicate that you could possibly imagine. So thank you for listening, and make sure to subscribe if you like more content. Some disclaimers here. All of my opinions are expressly the opinions of my own. Do not represent any company I have worked for or currently work for. You can find me on LinkedIn, John Ratsky, if you search for me. I'm also at the HRBP on TikTok. You check me out there. I produce some content as well. Before we dive in, I do want to let you all know that I do provide consultation services on a one-on-one basis. You can check me out on Fiverr. If you go to tinyurl.com/Ratsky Fiverr Services. That's Fiverr. So tinyurl.com/Ratsky Fiverr Services. You can see some services that I provide. I provide HR advice and career consulting on an individual basis. I can provide mock interviews and coaching regarding interviews. I can create a resume for you as well as a cover letter. And as long as it's off duties, I can provide corporate HR consulting for your business. There's some limitations that apply there. All right, so today I got two main topics I want to talk about. The first one is actually with the NFL quarterback, now for the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson. A ruling has come down. He has allegedly sexually harassed and frankly done some pretty inexcusable things with about 30 different women at this point, possibly more. If you have not read up on that situation, basically, Deshaun Watson has been accused on 30 separate instances with masseuses of basically enlisting in their services only to expose himself to the masseuse and basically do a lot of really sexually inappropriate things that I won't detail too much on this podcast. And the NFL has been very historically hard on their players when it comes to these kind of infractions. Now, if you go back and you take a look at the history of what the NFL has done, Ben Roethlisberger was in a very similar situation. However, it was only with one female that has accused him of sexual harassment. He got 6 games of a suspension. We have recently another NFL player that tampered, they claim. He basically was found betting on his own team to win a game that he wasn't even playing in. He was suspended for an entire year for that and lost a good amount of money. NFL announced, I think either today, yesterday, this week, that Deshaun Watson has been suspended 6 games, not even half the season, for the 30 sexual misconduct allegations that are against him. An independent arbiter finding that some of them may be accurate. There's no hard evidence to say that he's done everything that he is being claimed to have done, although evidence would be difficult to find. But an arbiter has said, well, some of it's going to be accurate. He got a total of 6 games and no loss in pay. And basically what I'm trying to get at is, how does this impact your business outside the world of the NFL? How does it impact you on your day-to-day life? You may be thinking, well, I mean, why am I listening to this? What does this have anything to do with my company, with the way that I handle my employees? And I actually think the parallel here is important to talk about. Consistency is key. We always talk about, it's a big buzzword in HR and it's a big buzzword within managers, setting a precedent. And if you don't know what that is, That would be a shocker, but let me explain it to you this way. The way that you treat individuals should be consistent across the board. The only barometers of treating people differently really should only be on the basis of merit and the basis on the situation in which the infraction came down, right? You should not treat people differently based on favoritism or based on any protected classification. So if you commit a infraction against a company, you should not be treated any differently than anybody else that has committed a similar infraction, unless, again, on the basis of the case itself or potentially on the basis of merit, right? A high performer that, I guess, what's a good parallel here that I could explain? I guess, there's a little bit of leniency that you will see pretty much in every avenue. In very specific situations, a high performer, let's say, having a really tough day and walking off the job versus a low performer that's on a PIP and is on a final corrective action doing the same act. There's going to be a little bit of difference in how the company might approach that. Obviously, other things that are cut and dry. I could go on and on. But so basically, when you commit an infraction, you should be treated similarly to everyone else. The NFL has not done that. The NFL looked at Ben Roethlisberger potentially as an independent arbiter, not the NFL itself, but looked at Ben Roethlisberger's 6-game suspension as a possible precedent-setting suspension for a single sexual harassment claim. They did not scale to the 30 that Deshaun Watson has, and instead inflicted him with a 6-month suspension. It's essentially like, if you're listening to this, listeners, imagine that you were to go to work and you were the subject of sexual harassment. You went to your HR department. 29 other individuals went to your HR department with the same person saying, they've done the same thing to me. And the HR department and the company decided, we're going to give this individual 4 weeks paid off, but he's going to come back. That's what the NFL has done. And again, you're probably still asking, dude, how does this apply to my company? The theme is what applies. The message is what applies. The idea of precedent setting applies. What the NFL has basically done in under punishing Deshaun Watson for his heinous acts and only giving a 6-month suspension, they have paved a path for future individuals that commit a similar infraction to get light punishment, to not lose any money, to essentially get 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks off during the regular season. If you have another individual now in the NFL that commits a sexually heinous crime against 30 plus individuals, basically never acknowledges or admits that they've ever done anything wrong. It's not founded on fact, because how can you unless there's video evidence? 6 games, no fine. That's a precedent. And you have sent a message to the rest of the league. Here's how you get 6 months, no monetary fine. That heavily applies to your company as well. The same concept applies to your company as well. If you punish an employee, discipline an employee, fire an employee over an infraction, you are telling the rest of the organization, whether you publicly say it or not. A lot of companies will not publicly say what their corrective action is, but you are basically setting a precedent for everyone else. And even though, and this is a common misconception, even though you may think, oh, well, we're putting this person on a final, we suspended them for a week, no one's going to know that. Newsflash, everybody knows it. There's not a single soul working in that department that isn't going to figure it out. That, okay, they probably did something to this employee in terms of a corrective action and they were gone for a week and now they're back. So if I commit the same infraction, I can expect the same as long as I act and the scenario is similar. That's what the NFL has basically displayed to all of America. If you follow sports in any capacity, that is what has been explained. If you under-punish, you are telling your employees, A, what you're comfortable with as an employer, and B, you have given them the playbook to do the same thing if they commit the same infraction. This is especially important in a union environment for sure. There's inconsistencies outside of union environments, but if you're in a union environment and you go to provide corrective action or attempt to fire an employee and you make concessions with a union to basically not do those things, no matter how heinous the act is, you've set a precedent. The union will come back and look at that specific instance and will say, oh, okay, so the next time I have a dues-paying member that comes to me with the same problem, I know exactly what to do to get at least that punishment, if not possibly less. Because you're not going up. You're going down, if anything. You're being more lenient, if anything, from here on out. It's an incredibly powerful story, Deshaun Watson. I personally am disappointed in the NFL for that punishment. I think in the day and age where we are consciously aware of these kind of infractions, as we as a society are trying to get away from these kind of infractions, we want society to start correcting itself and to stop committing these kind of heinous crimes. We're more aware of it than ever. We have more avenues than ever for women, for men, for anyone that's been a victim of sexual harassment to come forward. We're more accepting of the fact that victims their stories are reliable, their stories can be truth, than we ever have been before. We are more willing to cancel individuals that have committed these kind of crimes. We're in a day and age where we're progressing society towards a day where maybe women don't have to fear for their livelihoods walking on the streets. And yet the NFL basically took a look, and this independent arbiter, and we'll see what Roger Goodell does from here, and said, yeah, I don't know, 6 games and no fine. Give him a third of the season off on paid leave, and he'll come back. I think he's going up against what is he? The Bengals when he comes back. No progression, absolutely none. We had issue with Roger Goodell over punishing, and you may have companies out there that over punish employees. They took a major step back. That's disappointing. So again, you may be asking yourself, how does the Deshaun Watson punishment impact me and my organization? Again, they have set a precedent. They have publicly set a precedent for how they will handle similar infractions. And they have given you a playbook. If you commit such an infraction, here's what you need to do to only get 6 games off paid leave. You don't have to play those games. Congratulations. You just preserved your body. Again, apply that same mentality to corporate America. Absolutely disgusting. I am beyond disappointed in the decision that the NFL and the independent arbiter made for Deshaun Watson, because imagine if you went to work tomorrow and you and 29 other individuals went to an HR department and said, this individual has sexually harassed me and sexually assaulted me. And the company went, okay, 6 weeks off paid. They're coming back though. Imagine. Absolutely dumbfounding, in my opinion. So that was the more of aggressive side of the rant here. Again, I think the concept itself is very important. You know, when you're looking at the landscape of your business, if you're an HR professional listening to this, or frankly, just a leader, understand that certain infractions you have to be consistent on. I could tell a story here in my career where, you know, basically very consistently throughout, anytime that I have experienced a sexual harassment claim, and that I can verify it in any way, shape, or form, it's led to termination of employment. Because you can't have tolerance for that kind of act. That's a heinous, malicious act on another human being, right? Whether that's sexual assault, which is an absolutely heinous crime, or sexual harassment where maybe you were just trying to sweet talk somebody else at work, which you should never do. Maybe you thought and read signs differently. Your jokes went overboard. You crossed the line. Which that line's different for every individual person, by the way. Keep that in mind. Consistency has to apply in this scenario. And when it doesn't, it's disgusting. It's difficult. It's gut-wrenching for HR. It's a bad look for the employer. And it's risky. Imagine, if you will, a scenario, completely hypothetical, where your organization on male to female sexual harassment, indicating that the male is the harasser and the female is the victim, has very consistently had an approach where if you make so much as a joke that makes another individual uncomfortable and can be deemed as sexual harassment, you're going to be fired for it. No ifs, ands, or buts. See you later. Non-rehirable. And you have a situation, union environment, by the way, where a female harasser has victimized a male employee. And through the course of your investigation, you were able to verify that. You were able to verify independent individuals around the area say, yeah, she says some weird stuff, man. He has come forward to HR to say, it makes me really uncomfortable. I don't want her fired, which, by the way, when an employee says that, it doesn't mean anything if you're in HR. We can go, I'm going to go on a tangent really quick. If anybody ever comes to you in HR and expressly submits to you a complaint about a violation, but specifically says, I'm just trying to vent, I don't want you to do anything, or, hey, I don't want them fired, I just want this thing to go away, they could easily turn around in a court of law and say, well, I told HR. And even if you're like, whoa, hold on, yeah, you told me, but you said you didn't want me to do anything, a judge is going to be like, what do you mean? Like, no, you have an obligation to do that. So there is no situation where a individual can go to HR and say, well, I'm just venting, I don't want you to do anything. Second note, if you're an employee out there, don't go to HR and do that. We cannot simply let you vent. If you have expressed an issue that would violate a policy or a law, we have to make an act on it. Anyway, so going back, the male employee has said, you know what, I don't want her fired. I just want her to stop, maybe transferred, whatever. Manager is distraught because the female harasser is a good employee, works a premium shift that's hard to hire on, has worked for the company for a while. So playbook says, okay, we terminate though. Consistent practice. Any form of sexual harassment that can be verified is termination of employment. You go to the union and you say, hey, this is pretty cut and dry. We're going to terminate. And they're going to do their union thing. And again, this isn't a pro or anti-union podcast. I'm not going to go into it. Just know that there is a good and bad to everything out there, including HR, including unionized labor, including non-unionized labor, everything. There's always a good and an ugly. I'm going to tell you an ugly, but that doesn't mean there's not good. So you get into a room with that union representation, with your manager, with you as an HR representative, and the employee, the female employee that is the harasser. She breaks down. She says she never meant any of it. She had no idea that he was made so uncomfortable, that she respects him and his family, that she would never actually want to do anything that she said. She's blatantly admitting that she said these things. Consistency says you're going to terminate. Union steward says, well, if he would have manned up and said something, she would have stopped. Instead, he was a big sissy running to HR and filing a complaint. Manager says, man, she's showing remorse. I think we should do a final instead and transfer him out of the department. Transfer him out of the department. Again, a hypothetical. You say, no, we're terminating. Consistency. Deshaun Watson, only 6 months for 30, a much higher infraction than one sexual harassment claim. Sexual assault of potentially up to 30 people, only 6 months or 6 games, paid off. You say, no, we're moving to termination. Supervisor's not happy, goes higher up. Higher up says, we're not terminating. Final warning, that's your order. You now get to turn around, go back into the room. Employees magically stopped crying. Union steward looking with a smug gaze. You say, okay, we're doing a final warning. Any further infraction will result in termination of employment. Your coworker is going to be transferred. They're not happy. Employee's like, final. He didn't say anything. I didn't do anything egregious. I already apologized. Why am I getting a final? Steward, upset. How dare you give them a final warning? You're already being lenient. Manager seems upset that the employee doesn't appreciate the final. You'd meet with the male employee to transfer him. How dare us transfer that person in this hypothetical? When he's done nothing wrong, just a victim. He transfers to an undesirable department, quits 2 weeks later. Again, purely a hypothetical situation I'm giving you. But that stuff happens. That's what inconsistency gives you. That's a message that you just sent your organization. You as HR and you as the manager have probably kept that under wraps. But that doesn't mean that everybody else in that department and any other department didn't just hear about all of it through the grapevine. Union stewards aren't sworn to secrecy. They will spread things. They do it very often as an attempt to empower the union and to undermine a company. It happens. Again, I'm not going to talk good or bad about unions. This is facts. This is literally what happens. And now suddenly you have set a precedent. If you are a female harasser onto a male employee and you get your union steward involved, show remorse, cry, final warning, and they'll be transferred, not you. You just set that precedent. You have given that playbook. You have opened it up to say, here's exactly what you need to do to get the same treatment for a similar infraction. Never mind the fact that a male harasser on a female employee, the playbook is termination. Don't do it. Inconsistency is bad. It is incredibly damning to your organization. It is a quick way to strike fear into the hearts of your employees and to lose top talent. It's a good way to get sued. Be consistent. While the Deshaun Watson decision by the NFL may not directly impact you and your organization, that decision hasn't sprouted up a risk to you directly. It is a playbook. It is a shining example of what inconsistency can do. It's a shining example of what can happen if you don't do the right thing for your organization. I am curious, and I don't know if we'll see this unless a news story can latch onto it, how many female employees of the NFL are going to quit this week. It's an attack on the progression that we've made as a society to make it more acceptable for a victim to come forward, to not dismiss their story as falsification, to not say, even though a lot of people are, the only reason these women, 30 women on separate instances over a span of time where Deshaun Watson was eliciting 70 plus masseuses in a span of time where 30 of them are saying he exposed himself and performed sexual acts in front of them. But we have people saying that they're just making that up to get the bag because Deshaun Watson makes a lot of money and they want a part of that. We're saying that there's no way that could be trusted. They just want the money. As if there's not hundreds of other players in the NFL that make millions of dollars that don't have the same issue. As if we haven't seen a playbook anywhere else in the league. It's an attack, and I'm sorry if this is kind of going off of the HR path that we're on, right? This whole podcast is meant to be a brutally honest HR podcast, right? But it's important. It's an important lesson. It shows you where society is. Are we progressing in a way that we want our kids to live in? Are we progressing forward towards this goal where women can come forward, men can come forward as victims, and we're not going to assume they're lying? And when are we still stuck in this mentality that everyone's just trying to screw everyone else? I'm going to take a small break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about how do you approach an employee that has a low engagement level. You can kind of see their work starting to trail off. Maybe they were a good employee before and now they're not. You want to know more? Stick around. You are listening to the HR Business Partner Podcast, wherever podcasts are found. You can find me on TikTok at the HRBP. You can also check out YouTube. Just search the HR Business Partner Podcast. It's a great way to leave a comment if you want to interact with the show at all. Again, when we come back, low engaging employees. Let's talk about how to get them back on your side. You're listening to the HR Business Partner Podcast. Do you want personalized HR consulting to you at an affordable rate? Well, of course you do. Check out Fiverr.com. A lot of great people out there selling HR services, myself included. To see my specific services and to hire me directly as a consultant, you can check out tinyurl.com/Ratsky Fiverr services. Restrictions do apply. But go ahead and check it out. I can provide HR consulting to you for half an hour for only $25. Pretty affordable rate. We can talk about your career, what you're currently going through, get you on the right path. You're listening to the HR Business Partner Podcast. All right, let's get back to it. You're listening to the HR Business Partner Podcast. I am your host, John Ratsky. All right, let's talk more about engagement in your employees. I think this is a pretty common concern that managers have. And frankly, if you're an employee, you've probably experienced this or seen other people experience it. Let's talk about it a little bit more, right? So, you as an employee or somebody else that you know or somebody that works for you, good employee, comes to work, does their work well trained. I mean, they may even be an average employee, but you're seeing the signs of disengagement, right? The employee at a meeting is no longer engaging the same way. Maybe they're missing meetings, right? They're missing meetings for no real reason. They're calling into work a little bit more. They're showing up a little bit late. Their lunches are a little bit long. And I'm not talking about your occasional, hey, I'm just having a good day today. I wanted to take a good lunch, whatever. I'm talking this is over time, right? A couple weeks into maybe a month of time where you're starting to see this progression backwards. They're not socializing with their employees anymore. Their personality seems to have shifted. Their workload hasn't changed, but their work quality has seemed to go down. What I have seen in my career is that a lot of leaders will assume, employee's not as good as we thought they were. Let's get them on a track to exiting the organization. And there's some merit to that, I think. And I say that, and I don't want you to take it the wrong way. There's merit in the sense that if you're seeing a disengaged employee in a position that cannot afford them to be disengaged, and we're going to talk about how you should initially approach this issue rather than going straight to corrective action or anything of that nature. But there is merit to try to get it rectified pretty quickly. But here's the human way of doing it. And there is a human way. And I think there's a push for human resources to add the H back in HR. Add the human back into the business, right? For so long, we've had this mantra of keep your issues at the door. When you come to work, you're here to work. And when you leave, you pick your issues back up and you deal with them. How archaic is that? How archaic is that? Are we not human beings going to and from work? Do we stop being a human when we're working? No. Do we actually have a capacity as a human being to leave issues at the door? Probably not. So when you see somebody that's disengaged from work, what is your first assumption? They're not very good at their job. Well, they don't like working here anymore. They're probably looking to leave. They called in yesterday. They probably had another interview. If those are your first thoughts as a leader, man, leadership's got to be tough on you. Because if you instantly assume that anytime something is remotely off about any employee, you assume the worst, you're not going to retain employees, first of all. And you are going to be difficult to work for. That should not be your first thought. Your first thought should be, I hope everything's okay. I should check in with them. Is their workload manageable? Can I offload something or adjust something to get them re-engaged? So you may be asking yourself, well, I mean, okay, so I have a disengaged employee. I'm being told not to assume the worst. What if it is the worst? If it's the worst, it's the worst, man. If an employee calls off because they had another interview, nothing you say or do is going to change that. You can't deny them time off in an effort to prevent them from interviewing at other jobs if they have time to take. It happens. Don't assume it. Why would you? If they're going to quit, they're going to quit, right? So what do, right? You have a disengaged employee that you want to re-engage. You have to re-engage. You're reliant on their performance, or if their performance is lacking, they're going to start, getting walked out the door, right? It's going to sound so simple. Your first step should be talking to them. Let me tell you a story about my own career, right? I've had this instance happen in a couple of different employers now to date. And I'll be very open about this. This is nothing disparaging any employer of mine. I would never do that. I have a difficult resting face. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, you might be able to see it sometimes. I'll see if I can do it right now. This is not great for the listening audience, but if you're on YouTube, you can watch it right now. Here we go. My resting face, I have a little bit of a sunken cheek. I don't know why, because I'm a little overweight, but I have a little bit of a sunken cheek. My eyebrows sit kind of low on my face. I look like I'm bored or I'm pissed, right? And I've had separate leaders, my current and formers, come to me and they're like, John, hey, is everything okay? And I'm like, what do you mean? And in HR, you have a certain level of stoicness that you can turn on and off. If you've been in HR for any extended period of time, you know that you have a good poker face is what I'm trying to say. But I've had them come up to me and they're like, yeah, people have noticed that, like, you just seem irritated. You seem upset. You seem bored. Like, you've been in meetings where you look like you're just not into it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for bringing that up. No, I'm tired. I'm a father of two. I'm a little tired today. I'm sorry. Like, oh yeah, thank you. Right. So you may be saying, like, it's going to be awkward to approach my employee about this. I will tell you that there are situations where the employee just has no idea that they're coming across that way. I have actually through that feedback, been able to consciously change how I approach meetings, how I look in meetings. I try to be very aware of how I come across because it's important, right? I love what I do in human resources. And for the most part, every single job I've ever worked, I love doing HR for that job. So being able to sit in front of my coworkers, my bosses, my superiors, and my direct reports, and not seeming like I'm disengaged is important. And I would not have known that had I not been told, hey, this is how people are perceiving you right now. It doesn't have to be inappropriate. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. You can be very honest. Hey, is everything okay? Okay, because at meetings, you seem bored. You seem disengaged. You seem like you're in a different world. You seem almost irritated. Is there something I can do to rectify that? And don't assume that just because you notice those things that it's true. Again, I was not disengaged. I just happen to have a face that kind of looks like it sometimes if I'm not careful. If I get too comfortable, I fall back into this really weird kind of grumpy looking expression. My kids both have it. And it's so funny because we'll be hanging out with my in-laws or we'll be out in public and they just look pissed off because their eyebrows sit low. My eyebrows sit kind of low on my face. If you're looking at my face right now, you may be going, wow, his eyebrows are pretty low, unless he intentionally is raising them. They just sit low. That's how I look. I have heavy eyebrows. But my managers have felt comfortable coming up to me and letting me know that. And I'm an expressive guy. So if you have an employee that seems disengaged, bring it to them. Like, hey, you don't seem all that into this. Is everything okay? Is it accurate? Are you not into this? Are you disengaged? And you'd be surprised how quickly you will learn if your employee trusts you based on their response. Oh yeah, no, everything's fine. No, I'm good. Thanks. Yikes. Yikes. That's tough. No, really, come on. You can tell me. I want you to enjoy this job to the best that you can. I value you as an employee. You're doing great work, but I've noticed some slippage because you just don't seem into it. How can I help you? You know, now that you say that, I'm feeling overloaded lately. We didn't backfill the last person that left. Even expressly tell them, like, listen, you can be honest with me. Because I want to be honest with you too. And if you're lucky, you might have an employee that says, hey, listen, you know, when I make a mistake, you really hard on me for it. That's good feedback. A lot of employees won't give that. But it's funny how talking is the first step to rectifying that. Simply going to your employee and saying, what's going on and how can I help? You are showing that you care. And again, the adage of leave your baggage at the door needs to go away. It's outdated. We are not in a day and age where employees want to come to work and feel like a robot. Nobody wants that. Everyone, it is human nature. It is human nature to want to come to work, to make an impact in your job, to enjoy the people you are working for, and to feel appreciated for the work you're doing. If you can achieve all those things, you're a great leader, and you're going to retain your employees. You might lose a few to higher paying wages. And I have another whole podcast idea that revolves around the open book that is the internet and how it's impacting the job market, right? But if you can create a culture within your team where honesty is appreciated, where you take special steps to recognize when your employees do well, not above and beyond their job description, when they are performing their expectations well, and when there's an issue, they have a safe avenue to express it. Those are the things that you need to be able to provide to improve engagement. But the answer to the question, what do you do if your employees are disengaged, is an easy one. Talk to them. Put aside your outdated mentality that you're here to work and work alone. You don't have to get along with, or you don't have to like your coworkers. You simply have to work with them. Get rid of it. Everyone there is a natural desire to want to get along with people. So it becomes more difficult to some than others. I have big trust issues in general with people I don't know, right? And it's hard to get to know coworkers sometimes, right? You have to get rid of that mentality to help your team, to re-engage your team. Talk to them like they're people. Talk to them like you care. Here's the thought. start caring. As simple as that. That's your first step. From there, take their feedback as honestly and open as you can. Understand that you have a job to do, and their criticism is likely not of you, the person, but of you, the leader. You may have some personality traits that you display as a leader that aren't indicative of who you are as a person. You should work on those things if that's the case. And fix it. Explain to your employees how you intend to rectify situations. Be open with them. Be honest with them. Have regular dialogue with them that isn't just revolving around work. Be invested in who they are as a person in their life. Show humanity. So at the end of the day, if you are a leader or an HR professional and you have an employee that is disengaged from work, get rid of the adage, leave your baggage at the door. Nobody does it. It is so difficult to do it, and it's unrealistic. If my cat just died, I'm not coming to work cheery the next day. I'm coming to work a little bummed out. If you have an employee that is disengaged, believe it or not, and this is going to shock you like crazy, talk to them. Literally open your mouth and say, what's going on? You seem a little bit off today. Respect their boundaries if they say, hey, you know what? Yeah, things are fine, right? And move on. Or take time and invest time into listening to your employees when they come to you, the leader, and say, hey, not everything is great. I don't feel like I'm doing a great job. My cat just died at home. I'm having problems at home. Don't stop this adage where you think everyone's trying to screw you all the time. Like, you know how we say these things like, if you think it enough, you will it into the universe. Like, if you think your employees are constantly trying to screw you, it's kind of funny how it keeps happening, huh? And I've seen it in my career. I've heard about it plenty. And I know some of you watching this could probably relate to it. Man, listen to your employees when they have issues. Don't retaliate against them because that's super illegal. If your employee is a disengaged employee and you think, oh, they might leave, or, oh, their work is starting to suffer, maybe talk to them about it. Don't jump to corrective action. Don't jump to termination. Have a conversation with them. Talk to them like they're a human being. You'll be surprised at the outcome. That little adage was for TikTok. You can find me on TikTok at the HRBP. You have listened to the HR Business Partner Podcast. I definitely appreciate that you guys have come here and supported this kind of content. I don't know how successful this podcast will be. I hope it's going to be good. It's a weekly podcast for now. We'll see what happens as we move forward. Again, like, comment, subscribe on any podcast platform that you find. My preference is Spotify and Google, but you can literally do any of them. I've used all of them, and they're great. You can check me out on YouTube. Just search the HR Business Partner Podcast on YouTube. You should be able to find my videos. They're pretty low viewership count right now, but if you find them, congrats. You found a diamond in the rough, I guess. And you can check me out again on TikTok at the HRBP. You can check me out on Fiverr and the Fiverr services that I provide. Fiverr.com/Ratsky Fiverr services to see everything that I provide to you. Thank you so much for listening. Again, you have listened to the HR Business Partner Podcast, a podcast that gives you a very honest look into the world of human resources that you probably didn't know. I'm John Ratsky signing out for now. We'll check you again next time.